Now, hi everybody. Actually, some of you were here in my previous live stream that I did earlier today. Now, there were so many comments, there were so many people asking me to stay on. I had done that for close to an hour and I wasn't able to continue, so I thought I'd come back and do another real full live stream for everybody that is here now. So the idea behind this live stream is that I'm going to help you. I am going to help you to speak and write correct English. In order to do this, I'm going to ask you to put sentences in the chat box. A lot of you are saying hi everybody, hi Abbas, hi Darshan. It's nice to see all of you, nice to see many of you back. So now I want you to put sentences in the chat box and I will tell you whether your sentences are correct or not, and I will also teach you how to correct your sentences. So let's do this, folks. All right, everybody's still saying hi, so I'm going to say hi everybody. It's nice to see you all here. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm still waiting for my first sentence. Okay, Nalini says, can you make a video about the present perfect? I will add the present perfect to the list. In fact, I'm going to be making a series of videos on all the tenses soon. But for now, I'm going to give you just a brief introduction to the present perfect tense. Now, as I'm sure you know, the present perfect tense has a subject, and then it has a have or has verb, and then the main verb of the sentence in past participle form. PP means past participle. Excuse me. So the way we construct a present perfect sentence, as you can see on the screen, is you put a subject, and then for I, we're going to say have, because for I, you, we, they, we say have. I have just eaten a sandwich. I have just eaten a sandwich. So this shows an action that I did recently. That is, I did just now. The tense that people often get confused with the present perfect is the past simple. So this is present perfect. The past simple, on the other hand, has a subject, and then it has the main verb of the sentence in its past form, that is, in its V2 form. Okay, whereas in the present perfect, we have the V3 form. So how do I make a sentence similar to this, except in the past simple tense? Well, I say, I ate a sandwich. Now, the difference between these two tenses, and this is very important, the difference is that with the present perfect tense, we don't mention the exact time that something happened. However, with the past simple tense, we do mention a time. So, I ate a sandwich. So right now the time is 10 o'clock where I am, so I'm going to say I ate a sandwich at 9:30 p.m. I ate a sandwich at 9:30 p.m. So here you have a specific time reference. You don't have that specific time reference in the present perfect because we don't want to focus on the time. We want to focus on the fact that the action has been completed recently. So that's a very important point with the present perfect tense that you should keep in mind. Okay, Khan says, I just, okay. Khan says, I just done my dinner just before. This sentence is actually not correct. Can you say why the sentence is not correct? It's not correct because there is actually a kind of a mixture of tenses, because there's no have or has verb here. That verb is called the helping or the auxiliary verb. And there is a V3, a past participle verb. Okay. Now, for one thing, we don't say done with dinner. What we can say instead is, as I've said here, I've said I have just. So you can say I have just eaten my dinner. I have just eaten my dinner. Alternatively, you can say, and this is a point that initially you might find a little confusing, you can say, I have just had my dinner. Now you might be wondering, why do we have a had here and we have a has here? Now there's something you need to know about any sentence where you see two have verbs like this. Now I'm going to remove the just because it's not important. I have had my dinner. What does that mean? It means the same thing as I have eaten my dinner. So you can see that this verb had stands in place of the verb eaten. So had equals eaten. I have had my dinner. I have eaten my dinner. I have just had my dinner. I have just eaten my dinner. That's what it means. Okay, Khan asks, what about completed? We don't use completed with dinner because completed sounds overly formal. Jafar says he has had his dinner now. He has had his dinner is okay, but the now at the end of it doesn't really fit. You can say he has just had his dinner. Okay, Arjun has an interesting question. Is it older than... Let me change the font color here real quick. Older than or older to? Elder than or elder to? Now the word elder, it's uncommon to use it as an adjective. Usually we use it as a noun, as in children must respect and obey their elder. So you see that the word elders is a noun here. It means people who are older than yourself, people who are in positions of moral authority, and that's the common use of elder. With older, the word old is what part of speech? The word old is an adjective. So older is a comparative form of an adjective. So with older or any comparative, prettier, bigger, smaller, etc., you must always use than. So older to, is not correct. Older to is not correct. Older than is correct. Older than, younger than, and so on. There's another question from Prakash about the sentence that we just discussed, the present perfect tense sentence. Just now had my dinner. Give me a moment, folks. I'm just going to paste this in. So Prakash asks, just now had my dinner. Is this correct? This is almost correct, but this is not in the correct order. The words are kind of jumbled. You need to say I. With the pronoun I, we usually don't leave it out. So I had my dinner just now. That sounds more natural to me. I had my dinner just now. Okay? All right. Okay. Babu has a question. He asks, what is the difference between should and should have? Very good question. Okay, the difference between should and should have. Okay, the word should, I'm going to push everything else downward. Now, those of you who are listening, I'm going to try and share this document with you later on. So what I will do after the live stream is I will go into Google Docs. This is actually on Google Docs. I know that documents can be shared, so I will not delete anything. I will keep all these lesson notes here, and at the end of the video I will share the link to this Google Doc so that you can download and use it. If you want me to share the Google Doc, if you want all these lesson notes, say yes in the chat box so that I know that people want the lesson notes. All right, back to the question now. The question was, what is the difference between should and should have? The word should is used to give advice. That's the most common use of the word should. Excuse me. Now let's say that I'm coughing. Oh man, I feel terrible. Now if that was happening, you could say, you should go and see a doctor. You should go and see a doctor. Now here, this is not a moral obligation. It is not a duty. So I'm not morally obliged to go and see a doctor. I don't have a duty to see a doctor. Rather, this is advice. So your advice to me is to go and see a doctor. That's the good thing to do. Let me give you one more example. You should study harder if you want to pass the exam. A young person might receive this advice, maybe a kid in school. Now both of these, like I said, are pieces of advice given with the word should. The word should have, on the other hand, expresses criticism about a past decision or action. Isn't it interesting? What I found interesting was that Google Docs said that I had spelled this word wrong. It underlined this word in red, and then it realized, oh no, this is the correct spelling, and took that underlining out on its own. In any case, should have expresses criticism about a past decision or action. Now you remember this sentence that we just looked at, you should go and see a doctor. You just gave me that advice. Let's say I didn't go and see a doctor. Okay, so tomorrow we meet and I'm coughing even worse. I'm coughing all over the place. And now you might say, see, I told you, you should have seen a doctor. That means yesterday I told you to go and see a doctor, but you didn't. So now your health or your situation has worsened. It has become worse. So you're criticizing my decision to not go and see a doctor yesterday. Similarly, you should have studied harder. So you should have studied harder. Does that mean the kid passed the exam, or did he fail the exam? What happened? Let me know in the chat box and I will tell you if you are correct or not. So that's the sentence once again. Okay. Yeah, please, Krishna, can you please post the question once again, because I just got done with another question, so I can't actually see your question. How to avoid spelling mistakes? Ankit asks that. Ankit, the best way to avoid making spelling mistakes is, first of all, you have to become aware of your own spelling errors. The best way to do that is go over your writing regularly, on a regular basis, maybe once a week or twice a month, whatever, with whatever frequency you can. Look at your own writing and identify spelling mistakes that you make. One other thing you should do is note down the spelling errors that you regularly make and learn the correct spelling. These 2 steps will help you to avoid spelling mistakes. Those of you saying the kid failed his exam, that is correct. He failed his exam. He didn't study as hard as he should have studied. So now we're criticizing his past decision. That is that he simply did not study, and now he is reaping the reward. He is facing the consequences of that. Okay, Chris has a somewhat complex, a little more advanced, difficult sentence. I think it's interesting, so I'm going to take that sentence. Take a look at this. His voice, hardened by sarcasm, could not hide his resentment. Chris asks if this sentence is correct. I'm going to do a very quick analysis of this sentence because it has some useful grammar and some interesting vocabulary. Yes, this sentence is actually correct. Now, basically, this sentence, the basic form of this sentence is this. His voice could not hide his resentment. What does the word resentment mean? Resentment. Resentment means bitterness, especially bitterness about the past. That is the feeling of being bitter, the feeling of not being happy. Having some lingering, some existing feeling, some negative feeling about the past. So his voice could not hide his resentment means that when he spoke, he was not able to suppress that bitterness in his voice. It showed in the way that he was speaking. Now the sentence has this part in the middle of it, hardened by sarcasm. This is actually a relative clause. And it is a non-essential relative clause. I don't want to get overly technical. Let me quickly explain that point for you. It is a non-essential relative clause, which is a relative clause. It can also be called an adjective clause. The reason we say it's an adjective clause is because it acts as an adjective. It gives information about a noun. In this case, hardened by sarcasm gives information about his voice. Voice is the noun here. So this is an adjective clause, and it is non-essential because it can be removed from the sentence. So it's a relative or adjective clause which can be removed from the sentence. You remember that I didn't have this part in here, right? I didn't have it in here. His voice could not hide his resentment. So the sentence makes sense even without the relative clause. But what happens when we put it in there? What this does is it tells us something about the noun. And what it says is hardened by sarcasm. So the first thing you know about the voice was that it was hardened. Maybe he was speaking harshly. And that was because his voice had sarcasm. Do you know the meaning of sarcasm? It means to have a mocking, a tone that is saying the opposite of what is true because it's trying to make fun of something or trying to highlight the fact that something is false. For example, let's say that I didn't receive my salary. So I'm explaining the concept of sarcasm here. Okay? I haven't been paid by my company in 2 months. For whatever reason, my company has not been paying employees. Now, if I said this, oh great, that's just fantastic. Am I actually happy? Now, one of my colleagues comes and says, hey, they still haven't paid us and we don't know when they're going to pay us. And I say, oh great, that's just fantastic. This is sarcasm because I actually don't mean it's fantastic. I mean the opposite, that it's terrible. So that's what sarcasm is. So his voice, hardened by sarcasm, it had been made harsh by sarcasm, could not hide his resentment could not hide his bitterness. That's what the sentence means. Hopefully that makes sense. If you don't mind, folks, I'm just going to take a quick sip of water. Okay, great. Ridhima says, I don't know what's the use of having a live chat because most questions are going to go unanswered. Unfortunately, I realize that I'm not able to answer all the questions. But the problem is that I'm getting so many. I'm trying to answer as many as I can. One thing I will do, I will make a note of all the questions that all of you are submitting. And the ones that are most common, I will try and make future lessons on, not just in a live stream, but I will make a prepared lesson on. But if you don't get your question answered here, you can always ask me your questions in the comments of any of my videos. I try to make sure that I answer all the comments. All right. Danny asks a question related to the previous discussion. How should we use should have and should have been? Now, should have been is not really should have been is not really different from should have. Now, if you remember this sentence, you should have studied harder for your exam. That means the kid didn't study hard and maybe he failed the exam. Here, notice that we have three verbs in this sentence. The verb studied is the main verb. Have is an auxiliary verb. Should is also an auxiliary verb, but these two act as a single unit. Should have. They express criticism about somebody's action or decision in the past. So again, what we have is two auxiliary verbs, modal verbs, and a main verb. Now, when you use should have been, all you are doing is you are substituting the verb be for the main verb in the sentence. So, you should have been more serious about your exam. You should have been more serious. That means the kid wasn't serious. So, in a sense, both of these sentences mean the same thing. Just know that when you have should have been, the been is the main verb in the sentence. Okay, Plumian, I'm not ignoring your messages. I actually just saw this message of yours. The thing is, I'm getting so many comments, which I really appreciate, folks. I appreciate all of you being here, but it's just really hard for me to keep up with so many comments, but I'm doing my best. Okay, I will try to answer all the questions. Sai Bhargavi asks, why can't you provide a book on all these concepts? It's a good idea for the future. I will consider that. I haven't really given thought to writing a book yet, but I will consider it. Thank you for the suggestion. Thank you, Anand. Please explain ironically. Ironically is a question I'm going to defer for a little later. Maybe because it's a word that requires a slightly longer explanation, so I'm going to keep that for later. I'll try and do a lesson on that. Praveen asks, have you done your dinner? Have you done your dinner? Is this right or wrong, folks? Let me know in the chat box and tell me why it's correct or wrong. Okay. Muhammad Harun asks, what is the difference between maybe and might be? That is an interesting question. Okay, the difference between maybe and might be, there's really no difference. Maybe equals might be. In most situations, these are interchangeable. So you can say, it may be raining outside. We're making a guess. And you can also say, it might be raining outside right now. I'm going to put the periods or the full stops there. So both of these are guesses, and both of these mean the exact same thing. Okay, have you done your dinner is wrong, folks. Those of you saying it's wrong, pat yourself on the back, because we don't use the word done to mean eaten. So have you had your dinner or have you eaten your dinner are both correct. Okay, Srinath asks, could you explain the proper usage of I have been asked, I have been asked, and I was asked? If I got that correct, yes. I have been asked and I was asked. Now the first thing I want you to notice about these two sentences is that both of them are in the passive voice. How do we know that they're in the passive voice? Because we have a subject and then we have a be verb. Okay, we have some form of the verb be. This can actually be is, was, am, I should say, am, is, are, was, were, been, etc. You can also have will be or would be. There's so many possibilities, but I want you to know that we have some form of the verb be, and then we have a verb in the V3 or the past participle form. In this case, asked. Now, I have been asked is in the present perfect tense. I was asked is in the past simple tense. Present perfect and past simple. These are both passive voice sentences. The active voice sentence would be, let's say she asked me. Oh, sorry. She has asked me to do something. Okay, she has asked me to send her the report by tomorrow evening. I was asked, she asked me. So let me give you a quick example of these two forms. She has asked me to send in the report by tomorrow evening. This is the active voice sentence. The passive voice sentence is I have been asked to send in the report by tomorrow evening. Okay, the past simple sentence would be she asked me to send in the report. I'm going to change it a little bit. She asked me to send in the report. Now I'm going to say when she asked me. She asked me to send in the report yesterday. With the past simple tense, it's more common to mention the specific time at which something happened. Notice that here in the present perfect, in both the active and the passive voice sentence, we're not saying when she asked me. That's important. But here we can say I was asked to send in the report yesterday. That is the difference. Okay, Jibin asks, what is the difference between must be and should be? Now, we just discussed should a little while ago, and I said that should is used to give advice. So should is used to give advice. You should go and see a doctor. You should study harder if you want to pass the exam. Both of these are not moral obligations. They are not duties. These sentences both express advice. However, the word must expresses duty. The word, phrase must not expresses prohibition, to say that something is not allowed. So you must be at your desk by 9 a.m. This is the rule in a very strict, let's say a very strict boss set this rule for his or her employees. So this is a rule. It expresses a duty that you have to do. You can also use must not. You must not smoke in this building. This expresses prohibition, or it says that you are not allowed to do something. Okay? This is the difference between should and must. Should expresses advice, must expresses duty or prohibition. Amit asks, could you explain the uses of could and would? Now, the uses of could and would are quite complicated, so I'm going to, on the difference between could and would, please see my lesson called could versus would. I explain the two verbs in great detail. I go through several examples. I explain all the uses of these two verbs, so please go and have a look at that lesson. The reason I don't want to take this question here is there's so many uses, and it's such a big topic that you will benefit more by watching the detailed video. Okay. Tarun, I'm not able to see a lot of previous comments because there's so many. You're gonna have to ask the question again, I'm afraid. Thiru asks, how to speak English spontaneously? Okay, how to speak English spontaneously. Now, by spontaneously, what we generally mean is being able to speak on the spot without any preparation, especially if you have to give a talk or if you find yourself in a formal conversation, because informal conversations are normally easier for us than formal conversations. So at the workplace, in school, when you have to give a speech, how do you speak spontaneously? That's the question that I get most often. Spontaneity, being able to speak without preparation, is a skill that you'll have to develop over time. It's not something that you can develop overnight. However, as you develop that skill, there's one very important thing that you should do that can improve your fluency almost instantly, and that is speak slower, because speed is not the same thing as fluency. You can be talking slowly. Now you notice that I'm talking a little bit slower than I was before now, but still I'm speaking reasonably fluently. I'm not disfluent. I'm not struggling, searching a lot for words or anything like that. I'm still talking pretty spontaneously. So the thing that you should do in conversations is notice the speed at which you're talking. Become aware of your speaking rate and consciously lower that speech rate of yours. What that does is it helps your speech organs to keep up with your brain, because oftentimes, because we want to speak faster, we try to speak faster. You see what happened to me right there. What happened was my mouth tried to move faster than my brain. That is often the source of the problem for English learners. So my advice to you is practice speaking slower. Another thing you should do is learn fixed expressions. Learn stock expressions. I have a lesson on this. See my lesson called 100 sentences that you can use in everyday conversation. When you learn lots of stock phrases, if you find yourself in a conversation, you find yourself getting stuck, you find yourself blocking, not being able to speak spontaneously, these sentences will come to your rescue. They will save you in that situation. So these are things that you should absolutely do. All right, folks. The stream has been going for over half an hour. I'm going to take maybe 2 or 3 more questions, and then we will wrap this up. Anand asks, when will you be live again? It will be better for us if you let us know in advance. I agree. I will do my best to let you know in advance. Today I just decided to do a quick live stream, and I did it. Today is actually my first time ever live streaming, so that's why I'm doing it. But I will do my best to let you know in advance when I'm going to be streaming live. Okay, Sanjay asks, what is the difference between despite and although? That's a good question. Despite versus although. Now, although, let me give you an example. Although Mr. and Mrs. Jones are very wealthy, they live rather simple lives, or they live a rather simple life because we're treating them as one couple. So although Mr. and Mrs. Jones are very wealthy, they live a rather simple life. The word although here, notice, comes before this entire clause. Mr. and Mrs. Jones are very wealthy. That's a complete sentence. So this word, this is actually called a subordinating conjunction. This subordinating conjunction comes as part of this clause, and it is followed by what appears to be a complete sentence. But we can rewrite the sentence using despite. Okay, let me just say that this is although. Despite their great wealth, Mr. and Mrs. Jones live a rather simple life. Despite their great wealth. What we have here, so with although, we had a clause. With despite, we have a noun phrase. Their great wealth is a noun phrase. There is a possessive determiner. Great is an adjective. Both of these modify the noun wealth, and together these make up a noun phrase. So this is the most common difference between these two linking words. Although is followed by a clause, and despite is followed by a noun phrase. Okay, Vikash says, explain punctuation, please. I have a complete master class on punctuation in my channel. It's actually my most recent video, I believe. I will give you the link to the video in the description. You can see the video, not in the description, pardon me, in the chat box. I have put the link. Plumian of Bethlehem, I'm going to try and find your comment so that you're not sad. I see you. I see that you've posted a sad face in the comments. I have explored on such and such things. So Plumian asked this question. I have explored on some topic. Okay, I have explored on world history. Is this right or wrong? What do you think, folks? Let me know in the comments. Hannah, I'm terribly sorry that your question has gone unanswered. I will try and find your comment. Okay, so I've been struggling with writing since childhood. What do I do? Now, the reason that people often struggle with writing is that they don't follow the correct process for writing. Now, writing has a certain set of steps that you ought to follow. Okay, and the steps that you ought to follow are called power. This is the power writing process. I have done a lesson. You should go and have a look at the lesson. I explain the process in great detail, but very briefly, P stands for plan. So before you write, you brainstorm ideas and just come up with a basic outline for what you're going to write. Then you organize your ideas. That is, you put your ideas in the right order. Then you put pen to paper and you write. And then you evaluate for any mistakes. And finally, you review. That is, you read what you've written one final time. If you follow this process, writing will become easy. So go and have a look at my lesson called Power Writing. Oops, I did something wrong there. I explain the process in much better detail in that lesson. Okay, I have explored on world history. Is it right or wrong? It is wrong. Explore is not followed by on. I have explored world history, I don't know, in depth. Actually, this sentence is a little unnatural because we don't usually talk about exploring world history like this. So let me say, I have explored the Amazon jungle. I have explored the Amazon jungle. I have gone all around the jungle and I have studied the jungle. That's what it means. Okay? All right. Folks, I'm going to do one more question. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the live stream. I'm going to wrap up the live stream. I'm going to try to answer as many of your comments as possible in the chat box. Okay? So stick around in the chat box. I will try to answer your unanswered questions over there because time is very limited in this live camera setting. Shafali asks, when are you going to make the videos for the tenses? I've been saying that I will for a while now. I should get around to it. I will. Very, very soon. I will put that on my list of top priorities. Because many of you have asked me for tenses lessons. You've asked me for a lesson on prepositions. I will do that lesson as well. Okay, Krishna asks, what should I do? I always become conscious at the time of speaking English. The right term for that actually is to become self-conscious. That is, you're focusing so much on what you're trying to say that it hampers or it impedes your fluency. How to avoid becoming self-conscious in conversations. The best, the reason I'm hesitating a little bit for this question is that the reason we often become self-conscious is not really a linguistic limitation. It's not a language problem. It's not that we lack vocabulary or grammar, because this happens if you look at the entire group and the entire community of language learners. This happens to the best of us. We all become self-conscious every now and then. The reason it happens to us is that we become self-conscious because we are afraid of making mistakes. The only real solution to this problem is to become comfortable making mistakes. Become comfortable making mistakes, because no matter what you do, mistakes will happen. So please just accept that that's just what's going to happen, and you have to plow through your mistakes and keep going forward on your path to learning. In order, however, to make fewer mistakes, focus on getting lots of meaningful input. These can be reading books, stories, novels, and so on, watching English language movies, TV shows, etc., and practice becoming aware of language structures and new vocabulary, and try to incorporate means to include that in your own speech and writing. You will become fluent, spontaneous, and talk without hesitation with time and practice. I believe that. I believe in you because I have been in your shoes. I am a language learner. I know you can do it. So keep the faith. Okay. Now many of you are saying, please let us know before you come live. I will do my best to do that. I should have tried to let you know. This is my first day live streaming, so I'm just really excited. I'm really enjoying being live here with all of you. This is a fantastic experience. But going forward in the future, I will try to let you know ahead of time when I'm coming online. Okay? All right, with that, folks, I am going to wrap this up for today. I'm going to sign off here, but I will still be available for some time in the chat box, and I will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. Thank you very, very much for tuning in. I do this for you, and I'm very happy to know that you are finding the lessons helpful and that you found the live stream helpful. At this point, I'm rambling on and on and on. I should cut myself off. Before I do that, one last point. I will try to share the lesson notes. These lesson notes, this has now become quite a long document. I will try to find a way to share the Google Doc with you. I will put a link in the description. So find the replay of this live stream and you will get the lesson notes there. All right, everybody, take care. Happy learning as always, and I will see you in another lesson soon.